Hello again and welcome to Module 7. For the past few modules, we've been exploring this idea of entanglement, community, and collectivity, and we've looked at it from a number of different angles, from singing up the country to relationships with animals and marine life. We've been thinking about hierarchical relations, such as the typical way that we think about our relationship with nature, and also thinking in terms of more horizontal relationships, in which we are actually engaging in a much more equal nature, trying to figure out how that would work and what we might do to establish relationships that are more equitable. As a result of building a more egalitarian relationship, we might be able to build stronger systems of community, collectivity, and ecology. This week we're going to have an article and a video that on the surface might appear to be a bit different from one another, but I'm going to argue here that what they have in common is thinking through nature as a web of interrelated things that might look as though they're separate from one another, but are actually pretty well integrated with one another. As we return to this idea of eco-psychology and what psychology's interest is here, remember that psychology has an interest in both motivation, but also in the ways that we are produced as subjects or our experience of the world, our psychology of that experience. In other words, the ways that we think about the ways we feel, the ways that we perceive the world, and our place in it. The article Nature as Ally by Anna O'Malley has to do with a medical perspective of our relationship to ecology or to nature. So I want you to be aware that this is written, of course, before the pandemic. Everything that is said here in this article can probably be read even more dramatically given this rapid spread of viruses across our planet and their impact on our health. What we need to understand is that, of course, the spread of pandemics and viruses across the world is an ecological phenomenon. To use our new vernacular, it's a set of relationships in which human beings are embedded in nature and in where viruses, as a part of nature, find ecological conditions that allow them to proliferate and spread using human beings and other animals as vehicles for their own propagation. And of course, our activities as human beings allow for that. This article points to the fact that this is true about a number of things that we think about as being centered within our bodies. We tend to think about diseases as centered in and within our bodies and somehow separate from nature. For example, the article talks about obesity, heart disease, anxiety, and stress, and the way that we tend to individualize these things and think of them as an internal process that we are in charge of and that we need to manage, that these things are about our bodies individually. O'Malley gives an interesting perspective in that for her, as a physician, she needs to see how bodies are immersed within a natural context and that the ways that we are separated from nature actually cause a great deal of the health concerns that we refer to as epidemic. In addition to our current pandemic, we have an epidemic of obesity, we have epidemics of heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. O'Malley is making the argument that a lot of these things have to do with the fact that we are not in tune or in harmony with our natural environment. We can talk about this in terms of things such as pollutants that we're exposed to and the contamination of our food supplies, which are directly related to cancer, but also because we're so removed from any sort of natural relation to the food that we eat. When we think about wild dog dreaming in this respect, and the way that Bird Rose talks about the difference between hunting for your food and having a relationship with the thing that you're eating in terms of sustenance for you versus the factory production of food, where you're radically separated from any real connection with the thing that you eat. In fact, my guess would be that many children probably can't eat a chicken nuggets, or a hamburger, and then tell you in what ways their meal relates to a bird, or in what way ground beef relates to a cow. These types of disconnects allow us to have our food produced in such a way so that we don't think about balance. We don't really think about a relationship to nutrition, and these sorts of things can lead to anxiety, to overeating, to cancer, as a result of our scission from our natural embedded ecological sets of relations. So O'Malley is suggesting that we need to reconnect. She cites something really interesting when she says that being in nature, being able to connect with nature, being able to spend time in nature, as we've already talked a little bit about, actually has health benefits that reduce our stress and reduces our anxiety. To actually reconnect with the natural world and spend time in a forest, away from the high pressure environments that we've created for ourselves, that have cut ourselves off from nature by living in enclosed buildings with sealed windows and air circulation that simply reconstitutes air from within the building that we're in. The fact that we can go from our homes, which are sealed, to our cars, which are sealed, to a building, which is sealed, and never really step outside into the world of plants and animals. This sort of lifestyle is actually toxic to our bodies and is actually, in fact, damaging to our bodies. Now, in the video for this week, which might seem a little disconnected from the article, is about the ways that forests are actually talking to one another. Suzanne Simard talks about the ways that trees talk to one another through chemical pathways and through the mediation of fungus, and how fungus spreads chemical interactions amongst trees, and how trees can actually speak to one another through the fungus, and how the entire forest is actually connected. There are some other authors that are not mentioned in this particular video that have said that it's almost as if the forest is a mind and it thinks together. The interesting way to think about this is that if we connect the article and the video, one of the things that we might think about is when we do what the physician indicated, which is to enter into nature, do we also enter into possible communication with the forest? When we actually walk on the forest floor, when we sit in the woods or hug a tree or spend time getting to know the plants or the animals, do our bodies send out pheromones and chemicals and then take in chemicals from the trees that are actually beneficial for us in terms of our health, but also, going back to last week, begin to build a more horizontal or equitable set of relations in which we are chemically connecting to the forest and going beyond our usual ways of thinking about thinking that perhaps can happen at a level beyond consciousness? Could it be that these kinds of thoughts might be the moments where we go beyond our enclosed, individualized bodies and enter into a set of ecological relations that go beyond what we might imagine? I'm going to repeat that last question because I want you to take this into your encounters with your animals, your plants, and then finally your place in nature. Could it be that these kinds of thoughts might be the moments where we go beyond our enclosed, individualized bodies and enter into a set of ecological relations that go beyond what we might imagine? That is it from me for this week. Enjoy the article and enjoy talking to the trees.